All right, so moving on, top 5 tips for running a successful studio. All right, number 1, and I can't stress this enough, know your numbers. So it's a little bit, sometimes people, if you're not a numbers type person, you'll shy away and you're like, I don't want to look at that. Obviously, everyone's looking at the sales number, I bet, because when you own a studio, that sales number is really important. Well, I have some other numbers that I really want you to start looking at. So what I'm looking at, and this is like the very basic. You can get really serious and start to drill in. And if you work with a coach, especially a mind-body coach, they have some really specific things that they go through. But if you work with a coach, they'll give you some more support as to what you should be looking at. But this is what I look at every single week. So I'm looking at attendance. I'm looking at attendance by class because I want to keep an eye on which classes are growing and which classes are shrinking. So on any class on my timetable, if you said to me, Emma, how many people go, on average, how many people go to the 9:30 Monday reformer class at Ocean Shores? I could tell you because I'm looking at those numbers every week and I'm seeing the trends, I'm seeing whether they're growing or whether they're falling. So look at your attendance. Look at your capacity. So that's the next one. Capacity is the total number of spots filled out of the total available. So let's say you're running 10 classes with 10 people, 10 classes with 10 spots in each class a week. That's a capacity of 100. If you get 30 people to class, then you're running at a 30% capacity, which is not great. You want your capacity ideally, like best capacity practice is around like 70-75% is phenomenal. So anything around 70 is pretty amazing. It's hard to get much higher than sort of 80% because of cancellations. People will book in and then they won't turn up. So, but that's a really good number. You don't want to be putting on more classes if you aren't hitting that sort of 65-70% capacity number. That said, when you first open, you need to have enough classes to attract enough members. So you need to have enough variety across your timetable to attract members. So attendance, capacity, direct debit members. I'm going to say it again: direct debit members, direct debit members, direct debit members. That is the holy grail. You should be tracking that number every single week. You need to know how many members you need for financial success, and you need to work backwards from that. So let's say you have 50 members now and you're making $20,000 a month. You know that you want to make $30,000 a month, so you need another, on average, 25 members. Now, I am really simplifying this because, of course, you'll have class packs and casual classes and all of those sorts of things, but simplifying it, your members are the bulk. Generally speaking, direct debit members are the bulk of your revenue. It's usually about 70%. So if you look at your member numbers, you can kind of extrapolate out from there pretty safely. So you take that number and you go, okay, if I've got 50 now and I'm making 20,000 and I want to make 30,000, then I need 75. So that means I need 25 more members. How am I going to get to that 25 more members? Is it 5 extra members every month for 5 months and then I'll hit my target? That's what you need to look at. But you also need to take into consideration attrition. So every month, naturally, you are going to lose some members. So let's say out of the 50 members, you're losing 3 a month. That's about 6% attrition, which is that's about right. Any more than that, you start to go, why am I losing so many people? But 5 to 6% is about what you'd expect. So let's say you're losing 3 a month and you want to have an incremental growth of 5 a month to hit that 75 member target in 5 months. You need to add that 3 that you're losing naturally to that number. So then you need to have 8 a month to hit that 75 member target. So the 3 that you're losing a month, that natural attrition, people moving away, people changing jobs, can't afford it, pregnant, it just happens. So you have to factor that in. Alrighty, so we've said attendance, we've said capacity, we've said members. New clients is another one that I'm looking at. So new clients, I'm looking at how many new clients we're getting in the door each month. And then from there, of those new clients, how many of those am I converting to repeat clients? And of those repeat clients, how many of those am I converting to members? Because it all comes back to this membership number. So there's a lot more to it, and I can talk about the funnel and attracting people in, but I'll save that for another call. But so those are the key things that I'm looking at. Attendance, revenue obviously, but really attendance, capacity, membership, new clients in the door, and conversion to repeat customer and conversion to members. I hope that's helpful. All right, so that is number one. Number two is to build a strong team. So I have already touched on this when we were talking about opening a studio, and that was talking about culture and setting expectations. I actually didn't touch on the setting expectations part, so I'll talk a little bit about that now. So for me, I'm really clear about what my expectations are with my team. So I expect you to turn up on time. I expect you to do an acknowledgement of country at the beginning of the class. I expect you to leave the studio beautiful for the next teacher. But because I've treated them with love and respect, those expectations are met with, of course. They're met in a really nice fashion because I'm so kind and caring and open and loving. So that's sort of how it works. But be really clear about your expectations. But if you're not balancing that with treating them with respect and love and care, then there's a real disconnect. But build a strong team. Find the best teachers that you can, treat them really well. And it doesn't mean you have to pay them the highest rate because you have to balance making your studio profitable. But there's other ways that you can make your teachers feel really loved and seen, and that is, leave them a little note. Thank you so much for covering last week. I really appreciate you. Take a screenshot of an email that a client sent praising their classes and share it with your team, share it with that teacher. Make them feel seen, make them feel loved, and that will help you build your team. I also really encourage regular team catch-ups and try and blend a little bit of nice catch-up time, social time, but also time where you can set those expectations or reinforce what you've asked people to do in the past. Like, I really want everyone to arrive on time, or I really want classes to be harder, or whatever it is. Get your team together for a bonding session and use that time to also pepper in some of those things that will lift up your studio. All right, number 3 in my list of my top tips for running a successful studio is be present with clients and teachers. So I've talked about the teachers part, now I'll talk about the clients part. It's a little bit trickier for me because I'm doing so many things, so I'm probably not as present at the Bend Studios as I'd like to be, but it's so important for you as an owner to be there as much as possible. You set the tone, you lead by example. So when your teachers see you in the studio and they see the way that you greet clients, they see the way that you check in with pregnant clients, or the way that you set up the room perfectly, or that you've always got the beautiful candles on and the lights on and the music on, everything just so, you're setting that standard and setting that example. So being really present is so important. It's also, I know that there is a direct correlation with how often I am in the studio and how often I'm teaching, which for me, because I have so much on, isn't very much, but I know pretty much every time I teach a class, I will have an experience with a client that is meaningful and memorable for both of us. So imagine how many meaningful moments you can create in your studio the more present you are and the more you're available and setting the tone and setting the example and being present for clients. Alrighty, that's number 3. Checking my list. Number 4. Ooh, this is a good one. I almost feel like this is too good to give away. Just kidding. Nothing's too good to give away. Alrighty, number 4 is look at every single touch point in your business and make it just so. So that means every opportunity where your client is going to come face to face with a representation of your brand or a human being, you want to look at every single touch point to make it like, can you make it better? So, for example, there's the obvious stuff like, can you make your website better? Can you make your booking system better? Can you make your app better? All of those sorts of things. That's really obvious. But then when you get to the studio, can you make it smell better? Can you make it look a little bit prettier? Can you make the process, do you need to upgrade some of your equipment? Do you need to, the way that you set up the studio for classes, could you make that a little bit better? Could you make the voicemail on your phone a little bit better? All of those things. So do a review of every single touch point that you can think of and say, what improvements can I make? Because I can tell you that 50 or 20 or even 10 little improvements add up to a significant impact. So looking at all of those touch points, how can I make this experience just that little bit better? All right, number 5, don't do anything out of fear. Okay, so too often we freak out when class numbers are down or winter comes along. We're like, oh, I've got to do a promotion, I've got to do a special, I'm going to sell a 10-pack, or Cyber Monday's coming up, I'm going to sell things for half price because I need to get people in the door. Don't panic, okay? When you do things out of fear, it might work in the short term, but in the long term, it will often have a negative impact on your business. So try to get out of the fear space. And the worst thing you can do is cut back all of your spending and all of that sort of stuff. You have to find a balance. Let's say you're not making money, for example. You do have to find a balance between doing what you need to do to be able to grow and also protecting the bottom line of your business. But don't do anything out of fear. I would encourage you to find someone to help you first. Find a coach, find a mentor, and I'll say again for those of you who have joined recently, I'm not selling my own services. I don't do coaching. It's too much of a time commitment for me, so I'm not selling myself. I'm suggesting that it is really, really useful for you to find someone who's doing what you do and they're doing it really well. Find someone to support you and help you rather than acting out of fear, because more often than not, they will have had similar experiences and they'll be able to tell you how to work your way out of the fear space. Alrighty, so that is my little download. We talked about my 5 tips for opening a studio and my 5 tips for running a successful studio. Now I'm going to go to the Q&A, and I can see there's a few questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to do them in order and hopefully we have time for everything. I'll take a deep breath. Alrighty, let's do this. Michelle, hi lovely. Oh, hang on, I've just lost the thread. Hi, lovely, thanks for doing this. Thank you for sharing. It's my pleasure, it's my joy. When opening a studio, do you think it's a smart choice to look for a full-timer and just have one full-timer and yourself, or do you think having multiple casuals is better? What is your opinion on staffing your first studio? That is an excellent question, Michelle. They both have their benefits and drawbacks. If you were talking about having yourself one full-timer and some casuals, I would say absolutely do that. But if it's just you and a full-timer, as great as that will be from a loyalty perspective, a consistency perspective, and having that full-timer to do other stuff around the studio, there's two main issues that I see. One is that your clients won't have enough variety if there's only 2 teachers. And the other issue is what happens if one of you gets sick? Then you're in a real spot of trouble. So I would be more inclined, like, if your studio becomes a little bit bigger and you've got a few casual teachers, then I'm like, absolutely, if you can, opt for those really loyal teachers. Find someone that you can give, 10 classes to or whatever it is. And I should also say that the number of classes that people teach there's a point where they start to get less good at teaching because they're teaching too many classes. What point that is, it's really different for different people, and it's different for different styles. Like reformer, you could absolutely teach more classes a week than you could, for example, barre, where barre requires a lot more demonstrations, a lot more physical. The sweet spot for the number of classes for a full-timer really, really varies, and also how much other work you have for them to do. So I would be more inclined in this case to say I would opt for a few casuals, because you'll need some people to be able to cover classes. So that's my answer. All right, next one. Sarah, I'd love to know an estimate of startup costs for a studio. How much cash leverage is ideal? Okay, this one is a bit how long is a piece of string. So it really depends on the space. It depends on whether you've got 1 room or 2 room. It depends on to what extent you want to fit it out. So this studio that you're looking at, for example, behind me, was not very expensive to fit out, because we have mirrors, we have bars, it came as a shell, we put the floor in, and then just some pretty decor. So it wasn't massively expensive, and nice lights and stuff like that. But then we've had other studios where you have to do a full fit out and build walls, and then if you're getting equipment in, it's a lot more expensive. So, and the bigger the studio, the more, like floorboards, for example, the bigger the footprint, the more floorboards you need. So that one's a little bit how long is a piece of string. I would say the cheapest studio we've done was the very first studio in Flinders Lane, and that was only $20,000. But caveat, that was also 11 years ago, and there was way less competition, so the standards were a little bit lower, and we did everything ourselves. And then the most expensive studio we've done was about $250,000, I think. But I think my strong opinion is that's too much money to spend on a studio, way too much money. Now, if I were to open more studios, which I don't have the intention to at this stage, but if I were to, I'd be hoping to spend around $50,000 to $100,000 on my fit out, and then more if you're purchasing reformers. So, but again, it really is how long is a piece of string? What's the base? Like, what are you getting? Do you have to paint? Do you have to fix walls? Do you have to take walls down? Do you have to put walls in? There's so many factors that influence that piece around how much a studio costs. Alrighty. Ariane, as a beginner teacher starting out, would you recommend working in studios initially if your end goal is to eventually start your own at the end of the day? 100%. Absolutely. You should really get that experience, because it's so good to see how studios are run, what the studio's policies are. Like, the more experience you can get in studio, if you want to open your own studio, the better. It will absolutely help you when you come to open your own studio. Jennifer, hi Emma, I've always run my classes on a per 10-week term basis to have confirmation of income, and I've been nervous to move to class passes or casual spots. I have a small rural semi-home based studio. I'm wondering if you've seen the balance of both work well. So if it's working well now, then maybe you don't need to break it, but I would say that I personally believe that the best model for studios is the membership model. So memberships mean that your clients are committed, and I guess running a 10-week term and taking money up front, that means your clients are committed as well. So I can see that, but then what happens when it comes to the next 10-week term? If they want to take a break, for example, excuse me, sorry, I'm still getting over this cold. I would always advocate for the membership model. Now, it helps to have casual classes as well. For you, Jennifer, you might not have a casual, but you might have the 10-week block option and a membership. And the membership might be a little bit cheaper than the 10-week block option because you know you're getting that commitment from the client. And the idea is that they're not just doing the 10 weeks, they're doing 6 months or 12 months. So I always advocate it's all about memberships, direct debit memberships. Alrighty, just moving down my list. My pleasure, Rosetta. It's my pleasure. I want to be really generous. A lot of experience, so I'd love to share it. Georgie, hi darling. Do you use the automations and texts on Mind Body? Excuse me. I'm thinking of going back to using Mind Body instead of having a branded app, which will save me $8,000 a year. There's 2 questions there. One, do I use the automations in Mind Body? No, I use a tool called Loyal Snap. That said, we use Mind Body as our main software because we've been using it at Bend for now 6 or 7 years. And at that time, the automations weren't available in Mind Body. I think if I was starting now and working with Mind Body, then I would use the Frederick, the marketing automations that are built in. So yes, we like I said, we use Loyal Snap, and I find it automates so many of those tasks that would otherwise be manual, following up clients, doing in that sales and conversion process. However, my prediction is that AI is going to change everything in the next 6 to 18 months. I think there'll be big changes. But yes, if it were me, I'd probably be using the Mind Body automations because there's some extra things that you can do. It's really easy to say, text this class or set up flows that are just really seamless. And then the second part is about whether or not you get rid of your app. I actually really like my clients having a branded app. The drawback, even though if you get your clients to book via the Mind Body app that's branded Mind Body as opposed to branded with your studio, the drawback is that they will also see other classes, other studios in your area. So I think it is really important to have an app, but you've got to weigh up, does that extra money, saving that extra money, is that better than having the app? If it were me, I would keep the app, but again, we all have to balance, we've got to balance the books at the end of the day, so that's a decision that you have to sort of feel good about, I guess. Imogen, do you have any tips for studio name ideas? Yes, I do. Now, my first tip is try not to choose a name that is too similar to a bunch of other names. So what we tend to do with yoga and Pilates studios, sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to let everyone down, so hopefully you forgive me for the coughing. I didn't want to let everyone down. I wanted to show up, so I'm not totally recovered, but so please forgive my bit yucky sounding cough. Yes, so try and avoid something that's too many words. Like I've seen studios that have sort of 4-word names or 3-word names. That can be a little bit too much. Try and find something that is unique enough to you. I always look to see, is the Instagram handle available? Is the web URL handle available? And just, find beautiful words that you like and see if can you add that to something Pilates or something yoga, whether it works well. And finding a name can be a little bit tricky. I like to make up words sometimes, like bend with an E. I made that up. That's always a good strategy because then you'll get your trademark. If you want to get a trademark, you'll likely be able to get an Instagram handle and things like that. So they're my little tips on names. Jessie, yes, it's being recorded. Alrighty, Shane, or I hope it's being recorded. I'll die if it's not recorded. I'm really hoping it's been recorded so everyone else I can share it. Shane, I'd love to hear your thoughts on offering both barre and yoga in a new studio. Do you think it's a good move to diversify our offerings, or do you believe it's more advantageous to specialize in one area? That is an excellent question, Shane. And honestly, at the moment, Reformer is really having a moment. So the studio that we opened in Ocean Shores is Reformer only, and that's working really, really well for us. I think if you're wanting to open a Reformer studio in an area where there's a studio where there's not much competition, Reformer is a good place to start. However, at Byron, we have yoga, barre, Pilates mat, and Reformer, and clients love the variety. So, and I mean, the bigger your undertaking, the more money you're going to need to run the studio, to pay the rent, to pay teachers. So it's a tricky one. It really depends on how much cash you've got, like how much money you've got to start with, whether you can afford to take time to build it up. If you want the most profitable studio in the shortest period of time, in my experience, it's a one-room studio. So that's a mat studio like this one, or a Reformer studio typically works the best. In terms of having different styles, yoga, if you're opening a mat studio, yoga and barre work beautifully together. Our yin classes are super popular. So yin is a really beautiful complement, and yoga is a really beautiful complement. So yes, if we're talking just about a mat studio, I would absolutely encourage multidisciplinary studio. Alrighty. Georgie, how do you predict AI will change our industry and being a studio owner? So, AI is changing. AI is like evolving so rapidly right now. I don't know yet what it will mean for us in terms of booking software and client interactions and communications. What I do know is that there's the AI revolution is happening, and it's happening so fast. There are so many things that you can do with AI. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're looking at, because we have so many members, one of the things that takes a lot of time is managing member suspensions. We're looking at, can we get AI to do this? So there are AI tools where you can automate tasks and have AI do things for you, almost like a personal assistant would. So we're looking at stuff like that. So that's just a little, like, I'm just on the very sort of tip of the iceberg at the moment in my AI journey. Another example would be, I got ChatGPT to write some workshop descriptions for me yesterday. So that would have taken me it took me a while to train ChatGPT to write in the way that I wanted it to write, but it would have taken me maybe half an hour to write myself, to write 5 workshop descriptions. And once I trained ChatGPT, so the training ChatGPT took me longer than half an hour, but now every time I want to write one, it takes me like 2 minutes. So I just say, as much as you can, open your eyes to the world of AI, because the world as we know it is changing. AI, this is the single biggest shift in our society, in technology, in evolution since the internet. Like, it is huge. It'll change the way that we live. But let's all make sure that we use it responsibly. Alrighty. Oh my gosh, that's everything. I have covered off all the questions that I've been asked with 9 minutes to spare. I really hope that this was super useful, and I hope that I've been able to share some wisdom. A couple of things coming up for us. One, I probably will do another studio owner retreat soon. So if you're interested in that, send me a DM on Instagram. So it's held in Byron Bay, and it's basically studio owners or owners to be coming together, and it's a really great session. You get access to all of my knowledge, and we work through a whole bunch of stuff. So I think I'll be running another one of those soon. So if you're interested, just DM me so I know. The other thing is that we actually have a course called Studio Blueprint, which is all about how to open your own studio. And it's really reasonably priced. That's about to launch soon too. So if you're interested in that, send me a DM. And then the other thing is our amazing new launch coming next month. You will absolutely hear all about that if you're in this group, or you are in this group because you're watching this video, but it's pretty awesome. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I will do another live soon. I don't know when, but I love being able to contribute and give what I can. I hope that, I'm hopefully really generous in these sessions, and I really want to hear about your journey, so reach out to me, connect with me on Instagram is always the best, and and my Instagram is at Emma Seibold _, but I shouldn't be too hard to find. All right, thanks everyone, have a great day.